Good evening, good morning, and very warm welcome to the Vyntelligence Perspectives Thought Leadership Series. Shades of Green, what does sustainability mean for your business? Sometimes small ideas lead to big movements, and when we thought of this particular series, we were very excited. We have five leaders from five different industries and five nationalities. That little idea today, we have over 500 attendees from 30 countries and 15 companies. So can't wait to hear the panel and get their perspectives on what would sustainability mean for their business and what can we do our part to enable a better future and a better world. Before we start, a few housekeeping bits. All of you have a voice today. The voice is Mala Morris. She leads strategic marketing and channels for us. So please do share your perspectives. That is going to be an absolute important part of this agenda. You have a chat bar, and if you select all attendees, you will be able to share your perspectives, ask questions, and give your contributions. Secondly, a big thank you to the team that's helped us organize this, and they have requested a very short survey to be completed after we finish this evening. With that, let me introduce our moderator for this evening, Nandu Nandkishore. Nandu is currently a professor at India School of Business for Business and Strategy. He's also visiting faculty at London Business School and was earlier EVP and the board member at Nestle, the FMCG company that all of us know, where he ran a big part of Asia, Oceania, and Africa business. Over to you, Nandu, for this very exciting evening.
Thank you, Kapil. Thank you for introducing me, and a very warm welcome to all of you to this wonderful session that we have planned for you today. Let me start off by saying we live in strange times. The last 12 months has been very difficult for all of us as individuals, for all of us as societies, as economies. And I hope you're safe. I hope your families are well. And I really hope that we will soon see some light at the end of this COVID tunnel. As we move forward beyond the tunnel, however, we have this fascinating challenge that's on our radar screens as humanity, as business people. We realize today that the way in which we've been doing our business and living and managing our economies is simply not sustainable. We are living beyond the ability of the planet to actually support. So what does this mean for business? What does sustainability mean for business? What does it mean for the purpose of business? What does it mean for business models? Are there any specific areas that we can focus on? So today we have a fabulous star-studded panel, four brilliant panelists and one moderator and myself. And we'll be talking to you about their views on sustainability. The way we're going to go into this, I'll request each panelist to, before they come, I'll very quickly introduce each panelist before I ask them to speak. And the panelist will speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the subsequent panelists. Once we've done a round, and somewhere in that round as a moderator, I will exercise my privilege and speak as well as a panelist. And then we'll have a little bit of a panel discussion, but I'll invite the panelists to build on each other's points. And finally, we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience, which will be coordinated by Mala. So that's the rough flow of events that we're going to go through with. So without further ado, let's get started. And allow me to introduce our first panelist for today, which is Pauline Walsh. Pauline is currently the CEO of Affinity Water. She has broad international experience and a track record in leading transformational changes in large-scale operations in a variety of industries. She was previously Director of Gas Transmission for National Grid, responsible for building and maintaining the assets of UK's high-pressure natural gas transmission system. Prior to joining the National Grid in 2015, Pauline had senior leadership roles at Ford Motor Company, at Philips Electronics, at Havel Sylvania, and Fred Olsen. She is currently a member of the Water UK board. So Pauline, we look forward to hearing from you and your views on sustainability. May I invite you to unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nandu. I'm delighted to be part of this discussion today. I'm going to kick off by talking a little bit about the situation we're currently in, which is no less than a crisis. So the effects of population and economic growth are creating a rising demand for resources, and that is having a detrimental effect on the environment. In 1950, there were 2.5 billion people on Earth. By 2025, that's going to be 8 billion, and by 2050, we expect that to be 9 billion. Population growth, urbanization, and economic development all increase the demand for essential resources, including water, energy, food, and minerals. While many societal indicators have improved over that period, such as literacy rates, child mortality rates, and the spread of contagious diseases, environmental trends have deteriorated. So, as starters, the concentration of greenhouse gases is causing climate change. Fossil fuel combustion and forest fires result in air pollution, is killing millions every year. We're seeing increasing strain on those essential resources such as fresh water and fish supplies. We're seeing soil degradation, deforestation, extinction of animals and plants, and that's increasing. And as the climate warms, extreme weather is becoming more frequent, leading to storms, flooding, droughts, which are then leading to shortages of water and food and causing human suffering. The United Nations predicts that by 2050, the number of climate refugees we'll see in this world will be anywhere from 200 million to over 1 billion people. So for starters, as businesses and as society, we have to fully and completely understand and acknowledge the crisis that we are now in and rapidly put the brakes on emissions of carbon to achieve net carbon zero as soon as possible. If I put that into context, as a business leader in all of the industries I've been in or I've led, including my current one, if I suspected that my business was going to go bust, that I was going to run out of supplies, that I was going to be in that situation, we would be in immediate emergency action. You know, we'd put something like a gold command system in place. Very clearly, first thing to do is to protect the end customer, then you protect the employees, you try to find what is causing the issue, but you immediately put corrective actions in place. They may not be popular, but at that point in time, you're not talking about popularity, you're talking about existing and doing the right thing for here and now, and then looking at underlying causes and putting corrective actions in place. So as a starter for today, I would say if I look around at these facts that we know in front of us, are we really treating this as a crisis at the pace, at the energy, at the speed that we should? I don't think so. And I think as businesses, we are tasked with, and we have an obligation to do more and to do better because we know how to do that. And I think we're not reacting quickly enough. So I think first and foremost, our charge is we have to, again, acknowledge, recognize, really pick up the pace and putting the brakes on emissions and putting actions in place. We now also need to start preparing for a world that is with global warming and climate change. So, you know, we are in the middle of this now. It's not going to turn back. So we now have to not only avoid further damage, but we have to plan for a future where we're seeing the consequences of our actions till now. And therefore, we need to adjust our behaviors and we need to look to adjust consumer behaviors and ways of working in businesses and change our business models to ensure that we can live within our means on this planet to enable a sustainable future. And this requires dramatic changes from governments, from business, from society. I mean, I'm very pleased to say in the UK government was the first country to set legally binding carbon budget target, committing to an 80% reduction from the 1990 levels by 2050. Last month, they announced that they will set into law in June the world's most ambitious climate change target to reduce emissions by 78% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. And for the first time, this carbon budget will include the UK's share of international aviation and shipping emissions. Businesses must now be ready to act quickly and boldly to deliver those stretching targets. We need to be innovative and to embrace new technologies and ways of working that will enable us to drive down emissions. As CEO of a water company, I am acutely aware of the challenges faced by my sector over the coming years due to population growth and climate change. And a particularly important role for my business sector has in managing the critical natural resource water and of the direct impact we have on the environment in doing that. And it seems to me that while we are at least talking more about net carbon zero and carbon footprints, we're not talking nearly enough or loudly enough about water scarcity and water footprints. Again, some facts. Water is absolutely, we know, vital to life and vital to everything we do. It's required for all industries, manufacturing, energy generation, textiles, agricultural, food production. 2.5% of the total water on Earth is fresh water, but only a small percentage of that is accessible. Most of it is in glaciers and ice. Fresh water is a scarce resource and it is unevenly spread across the globe. Globally, over 1.2 billion people are impacted by water scarcity today, and another 1.5 billion people struggle to extract and transport water to where it's needed. Water demand is rising at twice the level of population growth. And again, thinking back to those numbers, 1950, 2.5 billion, 2050, 9 billion. So Houston, we have a problem and we've got to take it seriously. So at a global level, we need to have much more discussion about water scarcity and treat it at least as seriously as net carbon zero. When we talk about carbon footprint, we also need to be talking about water footprints. And then closer to home, we need to increase our pace of actions. So my company, Affinity Water, supplies water to 3.7 million customers in the southeast of England. This is a water-stressed area, and 60% of the water that we use is abstracted from below-ground aquifers. Now, these aquifers supply water to very rare chalk streams. There are only about 230 of these in the world, and over 85% of them are here in England. So when healthy, these are beautiful rivers with clear, cool water and unique in the biodiversity that they support. They are rarer than Bengal tigers. However, over the years, we have abstracted water in a way that has deteriorated the environment, causing once fast, healthy flowing rivers to dry up or to be reduced to a light trickle. So to enable those rivers to return to their natural state, we need to end unsustainable abstractions. And last year as a company, we committed to doing so. It will take time and effort, and it will require all of our stakeholders, government, regulators, communities, and customers to work together with us in doing so. But at the very least, we are aware we need to show our willingness to change and to do things differently to do our part. So we have set ourselves ambitious targets for reducing our water leakage and for reducing customer usage. We're also lobbying for legislative changes to make water efficiency labelling mandatory for household appliances. At least give our customers the option to make informed choices when they're making those purchases. In addition to our planned abstraction reductions, we've also voluntarily stopped some abstractions in our chalk streams by collaborating with neighbouring water companies and with our communities, and by changing the way we think and operate our network. And then within our company, we're trying to create a culture of innovation and pace. We're rolling out business excellence with continuous improvement and a fast follower approach to improve our resilience to the shocks and stressors that we know we're going to be facing and to adapt quickly to the challenges now and in the future. I mean, our regulator, Ofwat, have introduced an innovation fund, and I'm delighted to say that out of 11 projects, we've managed to lead 2 of those that have been successful in that recent innovation fund. So we are trying to create a new culture, a new way of work, a new way of thinking, a certain level of pace and energy that hopefully will lead and drive the sector. And also in trying to engage with our customers, we have found that very difficult. Not all of our customers truly value water. Unfortunately, water is a cheap resource, which everybody has access to here in the UK. But unfortunately, that means that people may not properly value water and understand exactly, where it's coming from and the detriment to the environment that people waste water. So we've been thinking different. We've been trying to think differently about how we communicate with our customers and land our messages in an engaging way that's not patronizing, but that's sort of trying to have our customers work with us. So we have a new campaign coming up quickly. I'm going to make a plug here as we're here. So please check out our new brand campaign. It's at www.saveourstreams.co.uk. So please do your part to help us to protect our streams. So in summary, I would say there are many good things happening in the water sector. There's many good things happening in business that will help to support transition to a sustainable world. As laws are passed, that transition, and as people in society become more aware of the consequences of not changing businesses, we need to adapt, we need to take leadership role, and we need to really grab those opportunities as well that will be associated with that, with pace and with courage. And I'm going to finish with the famous quote, one of my favorite quotes from Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. The future of our planet, of our children, of our children's children, depends on how well we now adapt. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline, for that very passionate case that you made on water. What we do about the sustainability crisis, this is the defining challenge of our times, of our generation. And hopefully this series of talk from everybody will cause people to introspect and develop action plans and think about what's the future for business in this era of sustainability. Allow me to introduce our next speaker, Doreen Lorenzo. Doreen Lorenzo is a successful leader of global creative firms. As a former president of Frog Design and Quirky, she has advised companies on design and innovation issues for decades. In September of 2017, she was appointed Assistant Dean of the New School of Design and Creative Technologies at the University of Texas at Austin. It has since become the fastest growing school in the College of Fine Arts. She's a co-founder of mobile video insights firm Vidlet, as well as a board member and advisor to several other companies. 5 years ago, she became a columnist for Fast Company Design, writing a monthly column calling Designing Women. Doreen was honored that Texas Monthly profiled her as one of the 15 innovators reshaping Texas. And now I'm going to invite Doreen to share with us how we should reshape business by design to be more sustainable. So Doreen.
Thank you, Nandu. And Pauline, you set me up, so that was perfect. Thank you. We are all here today. Everybody that's watching this, everybody that's sitting here, and we've come through a really different type of year. And what I mean by different is we had to change, and we had to change on a dime to keep things moving along. I know I'm, as Nandu said, I'm the assistant dean of a large school at UT, and in the span of 2 weeks, we moved everything online and didn't miss a beat. We didn't lose a student, we didn't miss a beat, and we're coming, Friday is our last day of classes, and we had a 74% increase into our school in applications. Why am I saying this? Our number one fear as making new things happen is the fear of change. Now, logically, everyone here knows we have a crisis. We've been talking about this crisis for years. This is no surprise. You could put your head in the sand and say, no, it's not happening to me. It's real, it's happening, but we are fearful. We are fearful of many things. I saw a question in the chat. What about shareholder value? We know that there's fearful about, well, I don't know how to do things differently, or this is the way things have always been done before. I'm here to tell you that this change is going to happen whether you come along with it or not. As I said, we were all just thrown into something that when we discuss it seems untenable, but we came through it. and our businesses kept going, and we moved forward with it because we adapted. We thought about new things. Kapil, you brought up something. You said incremental, small changes, very important. If I come into your home and I'm visiting you and I look around and I say, wow, I want to disrupt this whole household. I'm going to turn things upside down. They're going to say, thank you very much, Doreen. Could you please go out the door now? So what you have to look at, and really, I do tons of workshops on this whole concept of, human-centered behavior. How do we bring together different groups of people to come up with small but actionable ideas that you can test and put out? Because what happens with that is when something is successful, people jump on the bandwagon. We all want to rally around success. So I encourage you all to begin to think about, how am I going to make that happen? Because if you don't, you'll be left behind and somebody will be out front, because that is what always happens. But this is inevitable. The change has to happen. And you could be in the forefront or you could be a follower. And sometimes when you become that follower, you fall off the planet because you're not going to stop it. Look at the statistics. This is science. This is science. And I, used to do this talk before COVID, and it was hard for people to understand what that change means. But after COVID, look at what has happened. We have had to make changes. We're all on the Zoom call. Kapil, you would have had this meeting in person, right? And probably gotten the same amount of people. You got more people to attend on Zoom than ever before. Who would have thought? That's a change, and that's a positive change, right? We're all not on airplanes and taking up resources. We're sitting here and we're getting the same thoughts and the same meanings across to everybody. You have the ability, you all have the ability to begin to make that change. For 20 years, I traveled through airports, and in every airport bookstore, in every language, was a book called Who Moved My Cheese? Do you all remember that, right? So successful. Why was it successful? Because people are afraid of change. Get in front of that. Don't make change scary. Make it fun. Make it impactful. You feel good about it when you've done something good, and helping the environment, keeping this planet healthy and safe for our children and grandchildren is a really important aspect. Because I'll get back to the shareholder value question. If we don't make this change, we won't have shareholder value. And you can't think short-term, you've got to think long-term. So I'm going to leave it at that and just say, this is a solvable problem. We look at problems in design. That's all design is. It's solving problems. This is a solvable problems, but you have to remove the fear factor, because the greater fear is if we don't do something, it's not going to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Absolutely, you're right. COVID has shown us that we can change, and we can change fast. And hopefully now, with the provocations and the necessity for changing, we can also address the sustainability issue. As you rightly observe, if there is no sustainability, there is no shareholder value. What a brilliant statement. Thank you for that, Doreen. Thank you for inspiring us. Allow me to introduce our next speaker, Luis Manuel. Luis Manuel is the Executive Director of EDP Innovação since 2008. He is responsible for corporate venture capital and startup engagement activities, and is a board member of several startups like Efficiency, Defined Crowd, Archilid, Feedside, Aperio, Principal Power, Grid Beyond, and Vyntelligence, amongst others. He has previously worked in private equity and in portfolio management departments. He was earlier a member of the cabinet of the Secretary of State of Economic Development and Innovation during the 16th Portuguese constitutional government. He comes with a great deal of energy in administration and government, in civil society, and in energy. So, Luis, can I invite you to inspire us with your views of what we can do on the energy front?
Thank you, Nandu, and it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, and a word of congratulations for Vyntelligence for promoting this initiative. Sustainability is absolutely fundamental for players of the energy sector like EDP. For a long time now, we've embraced the challenge, and it has proven to be a wise business decision. One of the things we realized quite early on was that to be on the right side of business in terms of the sustainability front was a good business decision. And this is nowadays a thing that kind of separates amongst the traditional energy players. It kind of separates the winners from the losers over the last decade. The ones that have early on embraced things like renewables are the ones that today are more valuable, while several of the others actually do not exist anymore. In the power sector, sustainability is all about, an expression that all of you, I'm sure, have heard about: the energy transition. The energy transition, it is essentially, a path that the energy sector needs to go through in order to reach the net zero target that people talk so much about. Sometimes people put that target in 2050. It's I guess, a reasonable time frame to achieve it. Some people are more aggressive on that one. In any case, and pretty much like Nandu was saying, this is the defining challenge of this generation. What's going to determine if we are a successful generation or not is whether we can do a successful energy transition or not. It's interesting to notice that what hangs on the balance here is whether the ones that come after us will have a decent planet to live in or not. Probably, if we don't do this wrong, if we don't do this right, we will be the last generation that will still have a chance to keep climate change under some degree of control. I'm not saying, I mean, there's some things that are already inevitable. So there's an increase in the average temperature of the planet that we cannot change anymore, not on our lifetime at least. But one thing that we can still do is to keep that change into the 1.5 to 2 degrees of positive variation that still keeps this as a planet in which, we can have a decent life, or the ones that come after us can have a decent life. This challenge of the energy transition is something of a scale that it's hard to realize. I was looking at some numbers that could help us understand what's the size of this. For people to have an understanding, over the last 10 years, the number of deployment of renewable power generation, more or less is around 1,100 gigawatts. This, of course, tells nothing to people, but more or less this represents the total installed capacity that exists in a country like the US. So it's a very meaningful number. So over 10 years, we have deployed the equivalent of the US power system fully on renewables. This has been a tremendous achievement, if you think about it. Worldwide, in 10 years, building the US power system fully on renewables, this is massive. Unfortunately, or fortunately, if you are in the power sector, what you need to reach the goals of net zero by 2050 is much more than this. We can, the perspectives change a little bit, but we can be talking of something between 5 to 10 times that. So this is huge, because we look at the last 10 years of what we have been doing in the sector, and what we need to do is much more than what we have done. I mean, for EDP, this means, for instance, moving from in 2008 negative contribution of renewables into our EBITDA. Today it represents about 60% of our EBITDA as a company, as a group. So it's definitely already in our bottom line as the main source of income of the company. And this after 25 billion euros of investment after. So it has been a massive task. And when we look ahead of us, the only thing that we know is that it's going to take a lot more than what we have done over the last 10 years to make sure that, that this works. In order to do this, of course, we are going to have to change dramatically the way we generate power, but also the way we consume power. This is not only about the way we produce power, it's also about how we consume it, it's also about the things that we do in between generation and consumption, and it's also about the capacity to keep the power system working properly in a power sector that's going to be dominated by the so-called intermittent sources of generation that we cannot just press a button to have it. We need to rely on natural elements like the sun, the wind, water. All of that is going to be determined to achieve this transition. This, of course, will require a massive wave of innovation. There is going to be still some need of innovation in terms of technology, but that's probably not what's most important nowadays. I would say that most of the technologies that we need to successfully achieve the energy transition are already present. The difficulty tends to be focused on two elements. One is being able to scale these technologies fast enough. And this usually has to do with business model. What's the business models that we are capable of deploying? Are they suitable for the speed of change that we need or not? I would say there's still a lot of progress that we need to do. Regulation sometimes is still a barrier. And also, most of the times when we have a business model issue, usually it's because people have an issue in terms of the way we combine expectation of profitability with perception of risk. And I think that is still a major issue in the power sector, where most of the players come from a traditional business model where you invest and you get money because you have invested. And we need to change that dramatically into something which is a lot more people-centered in order for these type of things to work. And then another massive challenge is that the deployment of these new technologies requires a huge amount of resources, of deployment capacity. And that also is going to require a lot of innovation. So we need business model innovation. We need the issue of field services, the capacity to put in 1 year millions and millions of distributed generation units, of distributed storage units, of EV chargers. All of this is going to require a massive wave of deployment capacity so that these technologies can reach the end users. It's because of this that we have been creating a set of innovation tools. We like to call it innovation tools, things like startup engagement, things like corporate VC, ways to interact and to get into the innovation ecosystems and to extract the value that they can produce into the power sector. And it's precisely because of this that we were lucky enough to be able to get into Vyntelligence as an investor and also as a customer. Again, because of that, we are very fortunate to be here, and congratulations to Vyntelligence for this initiative.
Thank you, Luis. Fabulous and fascinating recounting. And I'm so impressed with what your company is doing. 60% of your EBITDA is already from renewables. Wow, that's huge. That's huge. People out there should take notice. And your challenge on business models was spot on. I'm going to talk about business models, but first I'd like to invite Kapil. Now, Kapil is the one person who introduced the session. Kapil has worked 20 years in the mobile telephone and electronics and internet industry. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies. He's set up businesses in Europe and North America. And the one business that we are all here because of is Vyntelligence. And Vyntelligence has done a lot to revolutionize business processes and to further the sustainability agenda. But I'd like to invite Kapil to tell us that in his own words. So Kapil, please unmute yourself and then tell us, so how can Vyntelligence help drive the sustainability agenda? How have you helped? How can you help? Kapil.
Thank you, Nandu, and thank you, Louise, Doreen, Pauline. Wonderful to see you here. I think everything that I was thinking I'll say has been said. So I'll just give a small anecdotal story. Doreen and I were at a World Economic Forum session in 2014, and the agenda of how do you drive sustainability over business benefits came up, and we were looking at a beer company in Costa Rica. And it's fascinating that this company went from kind of your story, Louis, negative EBITDA to 3x positive growth because they could create a movement to move away from tin cans and plastic glasses to glass bottles. And it wasn't anything else but the initiative from the younger generation in the country who took on to their brand 3 times or 4 times more. And that had a lasting impact on me, that session, Doreen. So we crafted our own purpose in this company back in 2014. And the purpose was to create a happier, healthier life for busy professionals in the field. And that's got nothing to do with technology, by the way, right? So that's something that we are very passionate about. And we see that, growing into the sustainability and the safety agenda today. And we've heard crisis, we've heard scale, we've heard dramatic change, we've heard need for innovation. I just think the race is on. And it's a race we have to win. But it's not a race that any individual can win. And I think, to Louise's point, if you think of ecosystems, if you think of extreme collaboration, right? If you think of people, how can you enable those people to get winners in their own rights? And you think of intelligence. So, people, intelligence, and extreme collaboration. There is a fair chance we're going to win this race, right? These days, I'm practicing my 4K and 5K runs. Some of the people in the attendees know that. So I would like to say this is not a marathon. It's a marathon with short sprints, right? So small changes that we have to do every day, every quarter to get to the final game where we're looking at about $15 trillion worth of investment in network infrastructure, right? This is from now until 2040. Bulk of that is green energy. A lot of that is 5G and communications infrastructure. A whole lot of it is modernization of water, gas, the kind of essential services infrastructure. And all of us need to do our bit. The tools from the past are not going to be helpful to win this race in the race to net zero, race to sustainability. So I'm just going to share a very short story on how a small idea of creating from the purpose to the design to the implementation helped deliver millions of miles of networks last year through COVID. So as most of you know, we provide short videos as a technology for field workers to report installations, risks, repairs, instead of filling in long forms, paper forms, which require a one-on-one interaction when a piece of work is done. So an expert comes to the field, they will look at the paper, they'll look at the site, and they will say, approved, work is done, construction can move forward. In 2019, we started working with this network infrastructure carrier, and we were working with people who build stuff from their hands, put cabinets, install cables, and they were like, we were giving them this mobile phone to play with it. You don't have to fill in this 150-point checklist, just take short videos and show what you've done. Some amazing things came out of that experiment, right? In 2020, of course, COVID happened. So what was supposed to be a productivity driver in 2019, as Lori mentioned, is now a safety driver. You can't send experts to the field to inspect the works that's been completed. So of course, the short videos started to flow from this worker who has just installed a site ready for inspection. And it goes to the people in Bristol and there are a team of 10 experts reviewing this. Typically, they would have been out in the field visiting 2 or 3 sites every day, right? They would cover about 10% of these jobs. But now they have visual evidence and very good view of what was done. And interestingly, not only did we save close to 1 million carbon miles, right? 10 experts, 500 installers in the field. That's about 1 million carbon miles of to and fro visits just for inspection and any unnecessary and failed visits. And at the UK HMRC rate of 42 pence or 45 pence at lots count on 1 carbon mile that's allowed to be claimed in expenses, that's also a 450,000 pounds worth of cost savings that comes from this little technology that we're talking about. The behavioral element was fantastic. You know, when people are ticking off forms and saying, yes, this looks good, yes, this was done, versus when they started to show their work, there was a sense of pride in the engineering workforce for the good work that they have done. And that has a nice economic benefit. What that means is you are not going to wait for somebody to come and snag your work. You will proactively show the snags so that you can be paid faster and you can be paid on time. And the outcomes were the end customers who were to approve the installations, there was a 71% saving in the time it takes to commission a small installation in a large network infrastructure project. Now that's huge, right? And you're just talking about one simple idea that we started. And the number of snags and reworks, which is, I think, the largest inefficiency in any construction program, went down 62% because we could get the people to feel proud about what the work they're doing. So it goes back to Pauline's point of if you're going to change in an environment of resource constraint, by enabling the resources, you can drive productivity. And 1 + 1 becomes 11 because these 10 experts are now looking at tens of thousands of jobs sitting in their homes, hopefully offices soon. And they didn't have to lose their jobs, no furloughs, right? And actually some of them were about to retire. And we've seen during COVID that, we brought back people who had retired, doctors, engineers to come and work. So you see the impact something like this starts to have on the society, right? You're more inclusive. You can bring people in to work from anywhere in the world, especially experts and who are 10x more productive than new workers. So, how do you kind of mobilize that expertise? There's another very interesting thing that happens because when you have 500 people and 10 experts recording 2 to 3 videos every day, that's about millions of videos. So you start to create a YouTube of knowledge base, right? And that's where some of our AI capability comes in because we can track and catalog that information. The impact on the society is you can now use that knowledge base to train newcomers. You can use the knowledge base to help your colleagues to look at information on how things can be done. So you start to create another economic impact from digital upskilling, which is absolutely important because if you have to deliver to these net zero targets and yes, some bold commitments all over the world, right? You still have to deliver it. And if you have less number of people to deliver this double the amount of work, there is no way you can deliver this without either improving productivity or improving skill sets. And finally, we also ensured or saw that it makes a safer society to work because there's so much situational awareness that AI can bring. So that was my little story that yes, we don't have to think of the large things only. We can make small experiments, we can make small projects, bring them to life, and allow it to scale because the change and the transformation vectors are right behind us, right? As we heard, we have no option but to move forward. Thank you, Nandu.
Thank you, Kapil. What wonderful share that was. How saved with one customer 1 million miles, you improve productivity by 60%, 70%, all by doing small things that eventually not only further the sustainability agenda, it saves money, and it also improves inclusion and diversity. Fabulous, fabulous share, fabulous examples. So I guess it's my turn to kind of pull everything together. And, from everything all our wonderful speakers have said, and I'd like to leave you with five areas to think about as you go back to your regular work. The first point is purpose. sustainability needs to be a core part of our business agenda. Because as we saw from all these examples that everybody shared, sustainable businesses are in fact able to deliver more profits. So you drive more shareholder value by designing your value chain to be more sustainable and therefore integrate that into your purpose. First message. That brings me to my second message, and it's a message that Pauline started us off with, which is you have to build organizations that can embrace change, that can change fast the way they work, and can actually scale these changes really, really fast. So second message, culture. In our organizations, we need to build a culture to change really, really fast. Third message, it's an old message, but it bears repeating. All organizations need to take responsibility for the full value chain of their products. That includes end-of-life usage of your products, the full value chain. And Couple's example, when you take ownership of the full value chain and you communicate that, how a glass jar-based product can replace plastic-based or tin can-based and actually create consumer value and value for the shareholder. So companies have to take ownership for the full life cycle throughout the value chain. That brings to point number 4. And point number 4, again, it's an old mantra, but today more and more economists like Kate Raworth in the UK talk about it. She talks of donut economics. It's the 3 R's formula: reduce, reuse, recycle. All businesses need to very carefully look at how do you reduce waste? How do you reuse materials that cannot be biodegraded? And how do you completely recycle materials that can in fact be handled by the environment in a responsible way? The 3 R's. And finally, the 5th thought I'd leave you with, which is a thought very well articulated by Frans van Houten, the chairman of Royal Philips. He says the future belongs to companies who can think of a product as a service. So don't say, I'm going to sell this bulb, the light bulb, to you. Think, I'm going to give this light bulb to you, I'll charge you while it runs, and when it reaches the end of its life, I'll take it back and give you another light bulb. Think, I'm going to give you this mobile phone for you to use, and when the mobile phone reaches the end of its life, I'll take it away, I'll give you a new mobile phone, and then I take responsibility for handling the end of life issues. So this, as you move away from product as a product to product as a service, and we see examples in front of us. Uber is a great example of a product as a service, product migrating to a service. Airbnb, great example. There'll be more and more such breakthrough ideas that will come. And I believe that companies that embrace these 5 principles will be the new disruptors in this new economy to come. So just as in the last 20 years, it was the digital disruption that drove the growth of trillion-dollar companies like Amazon and Alphabet. In the next 20 years, I believe it'll be companies who embrace the sustainability agenda, these 5 and more principles that will create the new trillion-dollar economic opportunities of the future. So that's my very quick value add to the wonderful stuff that all of you said earlier. We have a bit of time. Can I invite you? So please guide me, Hedvig. Should we go straight to the audience questions, or do we have time for the panel to talk about these?
Why don't we have a 5-minute discussion and then a couple of audience questions? I think we've gotten only a few audience questions, so
okay.
I've shared them with you, Nandu, so you have them in front of you.
Yeah, thank you, Mara. Thank you, Hedvig. So let me invite our panelists to, you've heard each other, you've heard each of us. So why don't you share some top-line thoughts? Let me start again with Pauline. Unmute yourself first, please, Pauline.
I will indeed. So I would like to challenge the thought that the pandemic showed we could change. So I completely agree that that is correct. So who would have thought a year ago that all of us would be wearing face masks, as we go about our ways? What I would say is the difference with the pandemic is there were laws which were put in place that told people you must do this. It was treated as a crisis, very clear direction, very clear reasons given why we have to do it, and people were held to account if they didn't obey, all by their peers, by their neighbours, as well as sort of by government and policing in some cases. So I think we're not seeing that now. And I guess that's probably my challenge, that we are in a crisis. All of the evidence is there that we are, we're at the point of no return. So we can't go back to the pre-warming days. So I do think small changes are important, but I think now is the time, for the first time, for this world, that we have to make big changes, and we need to be bold and brave, and we need governments to take very clear direct action, and we need as leaders to support and encourage that. I don't think incremental is good enough at this point in time. That's my.
Thank you, Pauline. That's a very direct message to governments who might be listening. I
want to jump in.
Yeah, Doreen, over to you. Yep.
You bring out an excellent point. So the problem then, if you're looking at this from the problem to be solved is not what the changes are. That's secondary. The problems to be solved is how do we get the governments to make this happen, right? How do we make this happen? So maybe we have to take a step back and say, okay, we can solve the climate problem. Like, we know what to do. Maybe that's the answer. But how do we get these regulations in place? Because we now know that really works well when we tell people that you got to do this. So often in design, again, is solving problems. It's not about the artifacts of the pretty thing. That's our problem to be solving. So you just brought out a new challenge, which I think is an excellent challenge that we all have to look at. That's the problem to be solved. Because I know I'm sitting here in the state of Texas, and if any of you read about our snowstorm in February, I had no water. I live in a very nice area. I had no water and no heat for 5 days. That's insane. And that was all government driven, right? So how do we get the governments to put in those regulations and make those change? That's our problem to be solved.
Thank you, Doreen. Luis?
Maybe elaborating a little bit on this direction. I think that the pandemic has showed us that governments act when the problem reaches a significant dimension. In the specific case of the relationship between sustainability and businesses, the biggest issue is that we need global commitments so that everyone can then implement the regulations, comfortably. Because although the clean technologies effectively can beat nowadays not so clean technologies in terms of economic performance, the fact is that this happens because they have been supported during a certain period. And there are still some technologies that are needed that are going to require either a slight competitive disadvantage at the start. I'm thinking, for instance, of green hydrogen when compared with conventional hydrogen. It's still not as cost effective. So there needs to be some global commitment that allows the users of green hydrogen that are contributing for a more sustainable future not to be placed at competitive disadvantage against those that keep on using the not so clean hydrogen. I mean, this type of agreements, they need to come from global arrangements between governments, multilateral organizations, and all of that. And if the COVID pandemic has showed us that governments act when things start getting serious, the pandemic also has an issue, shows an issue where the governments need to improve, which is precisely on the global coordination. Because it's one of the things we can say is that the crisis is getting extended beyond what it could have been, precisely because we don't have that global coordination. So, the Paris Agreement type of deals, these type of things, they need to be renewed regularly. They need to be incentivized, and people need to be generous when signing these type of agreements. I'm so glad that the political climate in of course a very important country for all of this to happen has changed so much over the last few months. Talking, of course, about the US, because we are going to need this open attitude, exactly the opposite of the me first attitude that we saw for 4 years, in order to make something like this work. People will have to be generous with each other if they want to strike a global deal. And this global deal that we have, we will need to renew this, I don't know, every couple of years, every 4 years, something like that, if we want to be able to reach the net zero by 2050, let's say.
Thank you, Louis. Very insightful. If you allow me to misquote Winston Churchill, humanity usually does the right thing when everything else has failed. So I think it's time to go for Q&A. Mala, why don't you curate the questions and then put it to the right panelist?
Yes, so I have one for Pauline. What are the stumbling blocks for water meters to become mandatory?
Again, that's a good question, and in some areas they are, so we can make them mandatory. Certainly in our area, it's a water stressed area, so we have that possibility. To be honest, I think a lot of it is engaging with customers to have them understand the need and why we're doing that. It's interesting. I'm Irish, and I was very surprised when they tried to roll out water meters in Ireland a few years ago. The absolute outrage from everybody involved. It was seen as an imposition and being imposed upon them. But the reason we're doing that, most people who, the person who's asked the question probably knows, most people who have a water meter installed benefit from it, because it means you're accurately being charged for the water that you're using, and otherwise it's an approximation. So it seems a fair system, but I think it's about explaining to customers, and that's certainly what I've seen in the last few years. Explain to customers why we're doing it, and not preaching and not sort of being paternalistic, but explaining that the whole environment, the water cycle, the scarcity of water, why we're doing it, why we have to appreciate and value water, and this is one way of getting us to understand how we're using water and to reduce our usage. So I think, yeah, we could say just do it, but I think there would be too much pushback. That's one area where I think it's about explaining and bringing our customers and communities with us on the journey.
Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Pauline. Mana?
Yeah, I have one more question. One question for Doreen. Are you seeing a change in the type of technology being designed for the deskless workers versus those who are desk bound, and how often is sustainability a consideration in creating these kind of technologies?
I think in the generation now that is creating new things, sustainability is absolutely an issue. I can tell you, when I look at, and Nandu, you could probably talk about this too, when we look at the students that are growing up today, that's almost on their radar is equal to eating. Right. So they're very conscious of it. So I think they have the concept of sustainability. In fact, I was just looking yesterday, I was reviewing master's projects in health, and this is in health, every single project had a sustainability aspect to it. So I think things are being designed for that in mind. And I think we have to make products and services that are human-centered. That means they're easy to use, they're simple, they're something that we want, they help us. And that will drive, whether it's for the people that are sitting at desks or the people, that will drive the change. It's the products and services that are simple to use. So Nandu, I'll just go back to your Uber comment. Taxi cab companies had GPS, were computerized. They had all the pieces to do what Uber did. But Uber made it human-centered. They put the consumer, the end user, in that case, in charge of their own destiny, which became something that was really favorable. Now, you understand this when you go out and you talk to people and you understand what are those barriers that are blocking people? Why isn't this happening? And again, those are the problems to be solved. And once you understand those insights, that will help you then make those changes.
Thank you. Can I have just one final question? Okay. Apart from how has COVID impacted the crisis, which I think many of you answered, quite, nicely. The person here has asked, are people going back to being focused on their individual health versus community versus planet at large as a result of COVID is what I'm interpreting. But that's the question. Are people, and this is to anybody who can answer that, are people going back to being focused on their individual health versus community versus planet at large because of COVID?
Only if they don't understand what's going on with COVID, because the difficulty in stopping the pandemic is precisely the lack of coordinated action. If we leave important countries behind, what we are creating is more possibilities for the virus to mutate and to mutate into a form that makes it hard for the current vaccines to be effective. So it's a clear demonstration that health has a very, very strong component, which is community, which is global even.
Mm. I would suggest that the pandemic has made people more aware of the environment and of how important it is. Certainly here in the UK, we've seen people sort of moving out of cities and moving to locations and appreciating parks and rivers and areas of natural environment much more so. So we've actually seen that's been one of the benefits of the pandemic, that people have a greater appreciation of the environment and are more willing then to engage in dialogue and discussion about doing things to improve it. So
I couldn't agree more. I've discovered woods around my place which I did not know existed.
And what we take for granted becomes much more precious.
Absolutely.
Which is how we have to start looking at the environment. So the absence of community made us more aware of the fact that we need community. And that's part of the scene change. And we have to get to that place with our environment and sustainability. The absence of water or power or just simple things that we take for granted is also going to help people make those changes.
Another element of interest is that I guess we all had that feeling of almost living in a doomsday science fiction movie when confinement started, and you saw no one on the streets, everyone was at home. A few things started not working. We couldn't get a haircut, things like that. Well, if we don't do this right, that's the feeling we are going to have, but for a longer period, So there's a massive incentive on doing things right on what concerns sustainability and energy transition.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you, everybody. That's been an absolutely wonderful session, great panel. Allow me to hand the session back to Kapil to summarize and close.
Thank you, Nandu. And I'm just feeling very lucky. I think I heard that one from Luis, that we are all very lucky. Pauline, for winning the 2 innovation initiatives along with the government. Luis, for moving from negative EBITDA to 60% EBITDA with renewables focus. Doreen, from running a brilliant design firm to actually taking that knowledge and inculcating it into the new age students. And Nandu, you do it very well all the time. You've taken all that knowledge, put us all together. So I don't feel any other thing but than to feel lucky. And I think I'm just going to say it's extreme collaboration, right? We don't want governments, we not only want them to add more regulations, we also want them to dissolve more regulations so that data can be shared. We saw vaccinations come out in 9 months, could never have happened if data was not shared, right? So we are definitely in the middle of the change. Let's keep doing our bit. And I would like to thank everybody who's joined us from all over the world. And this will get broadcasted over the coming weeks, months, and years. And I'm sure when we look back in a year's time, we can all feel very proud of being part of this amazing platform. So thank you all the panelists. Thank you, Nandu. Thank you all the attendees, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.